Welcome to the Exponential Potential podcast. Ignite your potential and thrive in times of great change with your hosts, Jennifer Evans and Claire Oatway. Join us and feel uplifted and inspired as we share with you powerful and insightful stories, top tips and tools with our expert guests on an array of topics covering all aspects of life and business, designed to ignite your potential and help you thrive in times of great change.
Hey, and welcome to Exponential Potential. I'm hosting today, and in some ways, this is a really special episode because the woman that we're meeting is the woman who inadvertently matchmaked Jen and I and got us together, even though we were never all three in the same place. So it's a shame we're not all three here now. But yeah, she's an absolute expert connector, inspirer. She's just awesome. So this is Karen Yankovich, and Karen is a LinkedIn strategist, a business consultant, a speaker. She's the CEO of Uplevel Media LLC, and truly been there, done that in terms of losing and then refinding that focused approach to business and to life. And Karen, you offer coaching and consulting to entrepreneurs, and you have got such a just get it done attitude. Come on, get it done, and you've got that passion for really soulful living, and that comes through. It kind of comes through in your online work, and I wish we'd been able to work in person so far. That's a definite goal of mine. And I know you from the work around LinkedIn, and those aspects, but you've also got this incredible podcast around Good Girls Get Rich, which has been going over a number of years, and you help entrepreneurs, especially women entrepreneurs, create wealth. Combining kind of the smart business that you bring in that sense, but real simple, actionable, proven systems to develop those strong customer relationships. I preluded the recording today by talking about you and describing you as the goddess of LinkedIn, which I personally feel
wow,
is
that's
true.
A lot to live up to, Claire. But I'll take it.
Yeah, but actually, I think it's really clever how you've been able to combine all of your experience in IT and marketing and customer relationships and kind of squeeze it all through social media to help entrepreneurs like me and Jen and many, many other people to really thrive. So welcome, Karen.
I am so excited to be here. Claire, I'm sure you don't even know this, but when I heard that you and Jen were doing a podcast together, I was like, wait, what? Because that is like my ultimate goal for the work that I do with people, right? I mean, yes, of course, I want to work with them, and I'm sad when they go on their own, but I know that that's a part of the process. But when I heard you guys were doing it, I'm like, that is the goal. And I brag about you two all the time. I share your podcast all the time. And I even talk to people about that, like, because honestly, one of the things I love most about the work that I do is the people that I get to have in my world, right? Whether they're in my programs or I work with them privately or interview them for my podcast. And I talk a lot about that, when I'm bringing new people into my world. And I'm like, not only do they, they're actually doing things like creating podcasts together now, so I love that you guys are doing this. I'm sad too that Jen's not here, but Jen, I love you and miss you and hope that everything's well with you.
And I mean, you've been, how many years has your podcast been running now?
Well, we're on episode 212, I think, is coming out this week. So, and there's definitely been weeks that we've missed. I mean, there's been a month that, we miss a month sometimes here and there, because there's sometimes just a little, but I'm going to say, I mean, it was right around this time. It was probably like, does that make 4 years, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, like this in October. So a little earlier than this, a couple months ago. And I will keep doing my podcast. I'm always looking for ways to, I don't know what I can do next. Like what's next for the podcast? I'm always kind of looking to make it better.
Well, we're snapping at your heels. We're a little bit behind in the start, but we're snapping at your heels.
Yes. Well, listen, I love that. I love that because you get to do the same thing now, right? You get to bring in, you know, there's a little bit of an edge to a nice edge to a relationship with somebody that either they've interviewed you or you've interviewed them, right? It just gives you another little, edge to building real, really profitable and authentic relationships, which is really where I believe the best business happens, right? So, I love that you guys are doing this.
So let's kind of expand on some of the work that you do, and we know each other from your LinkedIn world, and what drove you, what inspired you to take on that niche to help entrepreneurs like me navigate LinkedIn?
Yeah, Claire, when I first started doing online business, I was my journey started with I've always been in some version of marketing and sales, whether it was at direct or I owned a company. Like, it's always been something that I loved doing, right? So when online marketing became a thing, I started learning about it. I started taking courses about it, and I started doing it generally, right? Like, I would take on, we had an agency, our agency at that time had clients that we did, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all that stuff. And it was draining and exhausting because you have to know what's going on with all those platforms. But what I found myself doing, no matter what I was working on, I found myself driving people back to LinkedIn because I'm a little bit older than social media, what I knew was that what mattered was the relationships. And relationship marketing was what I knew how to do. And what I also was seeing, that we cared more about the people we did business with than we did maybe 20 years before. We cared more about, back in the maybe 80s or whatever, we didn't really care that much about the guy that sold us the copier. We liked him. We talked to him when he came in, but we didn't really know anything about him, right? He was a nice guy or a nice woman. But now we really wanted to know more about these people. So even though I was teaching this general marketing, I was focusing on LinkedIn because I felt like, to me, I realized was that if your personal brand was strong, it immediately elevated your business brand. And what started happening was people started asking me to speak about on LinkedIn. And when I think back to how I started this journey, there was an awful lot of luck involved too. I mean, I worked hard, but I think back, I think one of the first speaking engagements I had was the Massachusetts Conference for Women, which is 10,000 people, but somebody needed somebody and they said, you need to call Karen. And the next thing you know, I had this huge thing. So, and that brought me more credibility, which brought me more business, right? So I started to niche down on LinkedIn because I felt like it was what I was doing. And what I started to realize was the more I niched down, the better I did for my clients, because I didn't have to remember everything. I just had to get really good at one thing. And the more money I made, right? We know that from a niching perspective, if you are a doctor, you make $1. If you're a surgeon, you make $10. If you're a heart surgeon, you make $20. And if you're a left ventricle specialist, you make $50, right? So I was like, all right, well, I want to be a left ventricle specialist, right? Because I could do a better job. I didn't have to know all the things. And I could work a little bit less, right? And I could be a little bit more specific. So that's kind of when, and then from there, we niched down even more, because I had a journey for a while where I was partnering with somebody that does PR. And I realized the power of publicity for building our personal brands, right? So, when you're featured in the newspapers and the magazines, even if you're in some kind of transition and what you're doing is fairly new to you and you don't really have the testimonials, the publicity supplements that gives you that credibility. And then even further, we've niched down to supporting mostly women. Mainly because, not because I don't really care what your body parts are, how you identify. I have plenty of men that I work with, but I think women need to understand this more. We're really good at tasks and all the to-dos and not as good at shining a light on ourselves. So so that's kind of why I stepped into that. I started to step into that with my podcast. That was the first time I kind of stepped into really focusing on supporting women. And then eventually I shifted the work that I do as well. The program that, both you and Jen took it's now called She's Linked Up, because it's really meant to support women to really build that personal brand and build relationships at that really high influencer level.
Yeah, and it's and I love that you pulled that through, because for me, from owning my experience as a woman, you get on, you do the work, you kind of produce the results, but there's always that to-do list never goes away. So you're always focused on still achieving, still achieving, still achieving. And you don't really step outside yourself and go, bloody hell, she's good at what she does. Because you're just in it, aren't you? Which means that you very rarely go, you know what? I am excellent at what I do.
Right.
These are all the things that I've achieved. I've talked here. I've I've kind of brought her along this project. This is the kind of work that I'm fascinated by and interested in, in terms of the articles and publications, and you kind of, you don't deliberately hide, but sometimes I know other people, and sometimes they are men, often they are men, who just go, you know what, I am, I'm awesome.
Yes, it's true. And I don't know why that is, but it is just universal. It just is universal. And to pretend that it's not is kind of sticking our heads in the sand a little bit, right? And here's, and another side of this is I am, a lot older than you. And I grew up with, don't shine a light on yourself, women, girls should be seen and not heard, like so many things so we were taught not to shine a light on ourselves. We were taught this, for many, many years. And I think many of us still have that in us, right? And have to kind of overcome that. So I just, I love that. And it gives us an opportunity to think bigger, right? It gives us an opportunity to think bigger. And when we think bigger, just amazing things happen, right? Amazing things happen when we can think bigger.
And I encourage anybody who's listening to the podcast to, go and snoop on my LinkedIn account, or make sure that you've got links further down. But I've definitely felt your support, Karen, in refreshing what's on there. And it isn't that big spotlight. There's nothing fake in there. It's almost like my best friend wrote kind of my bio. Like, this is what she does. She's awesome. She's really lovely at this and this and this. This is how she can help you. It's not. It doesn't feel like fake in the way that many other social media platforms. You do a little bit of a touch up here and a little bit of a touch up there. You're not really true. Whereas the work that you do is authentic.
Well, and when you start to show up that way, people start to really know you. So many people still, and I get it because it's how it originally was, still look at LinkedIn as a place that their resume lives online. And what even LinkedIn wants us to do is to shift that from resume to brand, right? It's really the brand of you. And regardless of what you're doing, whether you're an entrepreneur or, have a paycheck or both or whatever you're doing, your brand is important. Your brand helps you get to where you want to get, and you can control that. So, the interesting thing, Claire, about the work that I do now, and this is not stuff that's like, because, like we're always evolving. And I just had a conversation with, somebody on my team about this the other day, is that this is important regardless of what you do. This doesn't replace anything. The work you're doing on LinkedIn does not replace anything. It's not instead of a business coach, instead of Instagram, it's just where you create that brand of you and you build relationships to support all the other things you do, not to replace anything else you do, right? And it became even more important as the world went into lockdown, because everything was virtual. And where I might have met you previously at an in-person event, I couldn't sit at an in-person event with my phone and check you out. I could do that while I was on a Zoom with you, right? So people are on Zoom calls and they're throwing the names of the other people on the Zoom in Google to see what they can find out, right? So it's even more important that your brand online, which I believe starts with LinkedIn, is tight. So it's not instead of anything else. It's important for every one of us to be doing this. And then you're building the rest of what you do from this powerful brand in this powerful place.
Yeah. And that's if you're an employee or if you're a business person. So
Absolutely.
it's not just for job hunting, just kind of using LinkedIn as a tool to hone your brand, to pull that through, to help you to describe who you are. That transfers into every part of your life. For sure.
Absolutely. And, if you're an employee and you are taking control of your personal brand and maybe even leaning into a little bit of the PR stuff, right? Like showing up as an expert and connecting with your local media and getting interviewed on the topics that you're expert in, it's going to be really hard for your company to ignore you when it comes time for that promotion or that raise or that elevation, right? So I like to say, there's the concept of a glass ceiling, right? Just ignore the glass ceiling. Ignore it. Don't break it. Ignore it. Go around it. Do you know what I mean? Like create a brand so strong that you can't be ignored, because if your company does ignore you, somebody else will bring you in at that higher level.
Where if there's a glass ceiling, that means it's a glass floor that the people above can see exactly what's going on.
Exactly.
And if you're making enough noise and taking up enough
Yes.
space, they can't
Exactly.
see
We had one person in our program, Claire, that I think came after you. Jen might have known her, but she just by doing her LinkedIn profile, her boss's boss called her and said, "How did I not know you worked here?" And within like 6 weeks, she had a raise and a promotion and a job. And that wasn't even why she was doing this. She had a side gig that she was building, but just by shining a light on herself and her accomplishments, like you said, we're not making stuff up. It's stuff she did. The mayor of her town knocked on her door and said, "I'm just here because I didn't know you. I didn't know you before." And my wife said, "How could you not have known this person?" And just introduced himself to her and said, I need to know you, so things and that starts to shift your identity a little bit, right? And that's where fun things start to happen in your life and your business.
And the program's been running as an international program because obviously I'm UK based and Jen's in Italy and you're in the US. Do you see any differences among cultures, among people, or among industries? Kind of what comes through from your side?
I mean, I do. Of course I do, right? There are differences. And the biggest culture, I kind of was laughing inside when you were saying, that I confidently, I don't know how you said it, but something about how I like don't let you slide. Like I like make sure you do all this stuff. And that's a very US trait, right? So I have to recognize that people people overseas have a very, like, they feel less, I have to be real different when we write their profiles. I still want them to shine a light on themselves, but they feel, and I have to honor this because I don't live there and you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
They feel that they have to do, yes, they want to shine a light on it, but they want to do it in a little bit more subtle way, right? So because that's what their business community responds to. And I'm okay with that. Like, whatever it is that they respond to, let's make that work, right? So I do think that, I think it's changing a little bit because I think the world is just getting smaller as we all start to know each other the way we do, right? But I think that the US, it's a lot easier to get, and it's still not always easy. I remember speaking to a woman who, like, her name's been in top 10 women in the world who kind of thing. And we did her profile and she was like, "I feel like I'm bragging." I'm like, "You did all these things, like we're just shining a light on what you did." So even here in the US, we still have to help women overcome that imposter syndrome. In the UK and in Europe, in the EU and stuff like that, I feel like we have to understand that their business culture is a little different. So we might go a little easier on it than, maybe use words that are still powerful, but not quite so strong.
Yeah. And one of the other really strong elements of the work that you do is that you reminded me about the network that I'd already built up. And so, I went to uni in Sheffield. I did an MBA at a different university. I've worked in different parts of the UK and made connections globally and kind of, you and so I not collect people, but I always want to stay in touch with people to find out what they're doing. So we link in on LinkedIn rather than Facebook. And I'd forgotten that there were these thousands of people who, I loved to meet but hadn't talked to, hadn't even checked in on kind of those relationships.
Right. And so many of us do. And it's so funny, Claire, because so many people say, "Oh, no, there's nobody in my network." And then I'm like, "Yeah, we're going to look anyway." And when we pull up their network and we start searching through it, they're like, "Wow, I didn't know that Mary was doing this now. I should find out about that." Like, there's so much opportunity there. And that is low hanging fruit. That's how this can happen quickly. And it's not like you're selling to your friends or the people that you went to university with, but they know people. So those conversations are just reconnecting calls, which I think is probably one of the most beneficial things anybody can do for their business, reconnecting with people. And those conversations are just, "Here's what I'm doing. Who do you know?" Right? So it's not, "Here's what I'm doing. Give me your credit card." Right? Maybe they're going to want you depending on what their role is. But more importantly, they know people. And now you're getting warm introductions to their people. And that is just such a beautiful way to expand your life and expand your business and expand your network.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me, kind of, are there some real howlers? What are the biggest mistakes that you see people make that are easy, either easy to fix or just like, please just,
On their
just
LinkedIn
stop
profiles?
with it. Stop with
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you really have to think about it. I mean, I can say if I looked at 20 people's profile, probably 18 times, I would say you have to shift the energy of this profile from resume to brand. So many people, it's really easy for us to list our accomplishments, like things like I'm certified in Excel. Nobody cares that you're certified in Excel. That's not really really what you want to think about is what's in it for the person that's reading this. And yes, you want to tell them about you, but you have to make it about them, or they're going to or your profile is going to be like everybody else's, right? Like an example that I use is if you're a financial planner and you have all these letters after your name, and you say I'm a financial planner, and I with all these letters after your name, there's probably 5 million, 5,000 or 50,000 or 150,000 other people that can copy and paste that exact thing into their profile. So it makes you different, right? So if you said I'm a financial planner and I help women over 50 create enough wealth to retire at 60, now you're telling them about you still, but you're making it about them. So how can you shift the energy of your profile from resume to brand and make it client focused, right? So that client featured, so that people see themselves in it and they say, well, I want that. Right now, I've just said to you, my podcast is called Good Girls Get Rich. My program is called She's Linked Up. So a lot of people say, well, aren't I going to leave money on the table? No, because I still have clients that are men. I still have private clients that are men. Sometimes we have men in our programs as well. It doesn't mean you're not going to get that other business. That doesn't mean the financial planner can't help a millennial, right? But it does mean that the people that you really do want to attract are going to see themselves in it, and that's going to make you stand out from everyone else. And that's all that matters. And this is a little controversial, but to be honest, I don't care if people never post on LinkedIn. If I had to choose, I would say, yes, of course, you should post on LinkedIn. But most importantly is, are you doing outreach? Are you connecting with people? Are you talking with people? Is your profile in good shape? And do you look like somebody's going to want to talk to? And so many questions I get is, how do I get more eyes on my content? To me, it's just the wrong question, right? The question is, how do I get more people on my calendar, right? And that's how you build your business. So if you're yes, more eyes on your content eventually could lead to more people on your calendar. And I'm not saying don't do that, but first thing you need to do is build the relationships. And that's because that's what LinkedIn is best used for. If all you're looking for is visibility, get yourself interviewed on some podcasts, get yourself on some other platforms. LinkedIn's algorithm changes all the time, and there's certainly ways to get visibility. But if that's what you're really looking for LinkedIn for, you're looking at LinkedIn for the wrong reasons. Does that make sense? So focus on you, focus on the relationships, not the content. I have one other student who she just left a big corporate job, and she was looking for positions on boards of directors, and that's really what her goal was. And she did such a brilliant job of the outreach that she literally had more calls than she could handle. She had more opportunities. It really worked brilliantly for her. And she kept saying to me, I know I've got to get to doing videos. I've got to get to these videos. I said, why do you need to get to the videos? She says, well, I need to post things. I'm like, actually, you don't. You are already getting what you need out of LinkedIn. Now, she also wanted to position herself as an influencer in a particular, I don't have permission to tell a story, right? So I'm not going to talk about where she is, but she's in Europe somewhere. And she wanted to show up as a women influencer in the business community. I said, for that reason, yes, you might want to post some content and videos, right? So people understand who you are, but you've already achieved your goal. So don't stress about posting videos. When you're ready to kind of dive into just creating that brand, that influence around you, then yes, start posting more and doing that. So I think so many people kind of flip it. So I would say, that's the kind of three things, right? One, shift the energy. It should be your brand, not your resume. Two, focus on what's in it for the people that you want to attract. And lastly, just know that the outreach is where LinkedIn is brilliant, not just the content.
Yeah, that's really sage advice, because we one of the questions that we got through in advance of the call today was, how do you work with the algorithms, and how do you avoid it just being this social updates? And then that led to I hate the fact that LinkedIn's become like Facebook and all of this is going on as well. But again, that's the wrong topic. the wrong topic.
Yeah. And, here's the thing. If we know what's going on with the algorithm, then we certainly should be paying attention to that, right? There's somebody, and I'll share it with you, Claire. You could put it in the notes for this. There's somebody that once a year, and it's just somebody like me, like it's just a guy. I can't remember his name. I will butcher his name, so I'm not going to share it now, but I will make sure you get access to it. Once a year, he publishes this big LinkedIn algorithm report, and he does it based on his own research. I did 5,000 posts, and here's what I found out. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. But basically what I tell people is do not try to do all of these things because you'll drive yourself crazy, right? However, things like if you're going to use hashtags, 3 to 5 is the right number, right? Don't use less than 3, don't use more than 5. So like what I basically say to people is read this and then pick 5 things on here that you feel would be valuable to you and do those 5 things. For example, one of the things that came up in the report was, if I share, you want to comment on other people's things. You want to engage with people's content, right? That's really valuable. But if I share it, it counts as a post on my wall, which we all know, right? But more than one post in 24 hours drops the reach of both posts. So, right. So I actually reached out to my assistant and said, stop posting on LinkedIn for me, because sometimes like they'll schedule something about the podcast and then I'll go in later and do it. I'm like, no, I need to be more intentional and only do this myself so that I can make sure there's one really good value post going out every day and not 3 in one day because I wasn't paying attention. And, because then I'm maybe spinning my wheels a little bit. So things like that. There's other things too about, for example, like dropping in a YouTube link is going to get you almost no visibility, but dropping that same video in with a Vimeo link is great. Like who would have ever thought that, right? So things like that. So I'll drop that in there because if we know this stuff, we might as well do some of it, but you can't, if you drive yourself crazy with that, it's going to make you nuts. But I want to give this guy credit. Make sure when we do this, I'll link right to his post on LinkedIn. So it's hard not to give him credit. I'm so grateful he does this because I surely wouldn't do it. And here's the thing too, Claire, he published this. It literally was, I think the end of October or the beginning of November. It could be changed already. Like it could have changed already. It comes out once a year. I think it comes out once a year. It could have changed already. Like, so it's not like this is the Bible, do this. It's like, this is what I found over a year's worth of research, but the day after it's published, it could change. Right. So, so that's why I say don't overthink that piece of it.
Just see what fits you and just give it a try. That's all.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you a question because one of the things that I receive regularly on LinkedIn are people going, oh yeah, I'll do this for you. I'll manage your account for you. I'll do this, which is tempting if you're a busy entrepreneur and just don't feel like you've got time for it. But it just, something doesn't feel quite right about that.
I get it. Well, here's the thing. I feel like my in my business, I have a line drawn in the sand, and that line is I'm not going to teach anything that's against LinkedIn's terms of service. I'm not the LinkedIn police, right? But one of the things LinkedIn's terms of service says is nobody logs into your account but you, right? And like, even when we do your profiles, we don't log in as you, you know what I mean? You log in and we help you do it. Sometimes we can take over your screen on Zoom and help you do it that way, but you're logged in. We never know your LinkedIn password. So right off the bat, you're risking your profile if you're using these companies that spin these AI tools, right? These AI tools and say you're risking your profile. And I have some friends that run these tools, and I've had this conversation with them. And I can tell you right now, at this moment in time, I have 2, maybe 3 clients, 2 private clients, and 1 client in my program that came to me after they got their profile shut down by using one of those tools. And said, I need to know how to do this. I know LinkedIn's valuable. How do I do this right? So, and in some cases, in one case at least, when she came to me, when her profile got shut down, really, really wanted to say to her was, don't you wish you hired me sooner instead of this other guy? Do you know what I mean? But I didn't. I just kind of like helped her get it back. And then she ultimately came back to me and hired me because, so that's right off the bat, that's my biggest problem with it. But, I feel like LinkedIn can be your money tree, and that's the weeds, right? We don't want to ignore our money tree because there's some weeds. So ignore that stuff. You can connect, you cannot connect, doesn't matter to me, but don't good place because there's some people that use those tools and spam. I don't like them at all. In fact, we just released a, I started my business as an agency, right? And we are now reopening that agency just to do LinkedIn, to do exactly what, because in my head, I'm like, I see these people with these tools making like getting 10, 20 new clients every month. And I'm thinking, it drives me a little crazy. So I was like, well, so I know there's a market for this, right? So, it's okay to be a busy entrepreneur and want help with lead generation and PR opportunities, right? So we have just crafted an agency model that does this without logging in for you. There is a little bit more responsibility on the client side, obviously, if I'm not logging in as them, but we're spoon feeding them the opportunities. We're doing all the research. We can publish the content. We're toying with things like, could we get VPN access to their, like even Zoom access? Like if you and I decided to do this, you can say, Karen, I'm going to lunch from 12 to 1. I'm going to leave Zoom open, and I can control your computer from Zoom, and I can go into your LinkedIn account from your thing and do some updates. And, so we're toying with things like that might overcomplicate it a little bit, because there should be a way to get help with this. My commitment though is, how do we do this and stay true to LinkedIn's terms of service so that we are, at the end of the day, it's their platform, right? Like, why do we want to scam them? It's their platform. Like, they make the rules. How do we use it and still benefit greatly from it, and follow by following their rules. So we have taken on a couple of agency clients, and we're looking in 2023 to open that up more, because I do know that there's a need for that. It's just, we've got to figure out how we can do it that makes sense.
Oh, it's really interesting. Really interesting. And just for, one more LinkedIn question, because there'll be loads of people that are
cool.
dialing in, and
I'm here for you.
So, and the title of our podcast is around exponential potential. And this, both Jen and I think you're similar, kind of can see how much potential every single one of us has to just step up and step into who we are and change. You don't have to change the world, but anybody is
right.
Is
change one person, you're changing the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the aspects around LinkedIn is around the communities, and how, and the groups that are there, and how can you use groups perhaps as a way of demonstrating who you are, and just adding that little extra value, and just going, here I am, so the rest of the world know that you're there.
Well, I mean, first of all, it does start with your profile, right? That's why, when we were talking about this, we talked about, like, I know you've got exponential potential, you've got exponential potential, but if you're not telling everyone else you, then the rest of the world doesn't. Then you're the best kept secret, right? So you have to start with a profile that really shines a light on what makes you different and what makes you special. And that can be for everybody. I would love to sit here and tell you that groups are brilliant and they're gold. They are not. They're terrible on LinkedIn. They're just, I wish that, and LinkedIn keeps saying that they're going to do more with groups, and they do things, but then it doesn't really change anything. So I don't think I would spend a lot of time on LinkedIn groups right now, just because I don't think there's a lot of value there. And I can tell you, don't even bother posting in groups, because if I pick a group at random and I scan through it, I can see there'll be post with 0 engagement. Nobody's reading the post in the group. However, if you want to use LinkedIn groups and there's a group that has your potentially ideal clients in it, be the person going into that group and commenting on that post, because nobody else is, right? So you have this great potential, this great profile, right? You're going into these groups that no one else is commenting on the content on, and you're the only one commenting on the content. Now you're standing out and you're bringing your expertise to that group. To me, that is really, at this moment in time, the only way that groups are really of any value, because they're just not. I also think LinkedIn company pages should make a comeback, and I'm a little hopeful that they're making a comeback, and I'm really diving a little deeper into that. I think your company page, where I talk about your profile, should be all about the brand of you. So where do you talk about your products and services? Well, your company page, right? And if you do a good job of connecting them together, that's where you can do some of that too. I just don't think groups is the answer. I would love to say yes to that, but it's just not.
This is true, but at least, thankfully, thankfully the groups on LinkedIn aren't like the groups on Facebook where you kind of put in a comment and then people are selling crypto and
Right.
something else. There's not anything to do with the original post.
Right.
It's just like spam, spam, spam,
Right.
spam.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dear. So kind of just, I think perhaps just one last area to look at, and that's the podcast, and kind of obviously it's called Good Girls Get Rich.
Hey Claire, can we jump into one more thing before we get to the podcast?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think there's one thing, and actually, if it's okay with you, I'm going to bring you into this piece. The thing we haven't really talked about LinkedIn is that it's not the place to sell like your pens, right? When you're thinking about LinkedIn and what you're offering, you need to think about your highest ticket offers, right? Like it's the place to get a distributor that wants 50,000 of your pens. And I remember a conversation with you where we were talking about, and if you don't like this, you can edit this out.
That's okay.
But we were talking about what you were offering, and you said to me, "I've got this thing. I think it's 5,000, but I know you're going to want it to be 10,000. So let's pretend it's 10,000." So we created this package around this 10,000 thing. And then like 15 minutes in, I said, let me ask you a question. What if it was 20,000? And your eyes lit up and you were like, well, then I could do this. I could do more assessments. I could bring people in. I could be on site. Like your eyes lit up. I'm like, that's beautiful. Now they're getting more value. You need less customers, and it's win, 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 win. And I think that is what people don't understand, that higher ticket opportunities don't just mean you're overcharging, right? If you go to LinkedIn with your highest opportunities and really understand what can change for your customers when you come into them with those higher ticket opportunities, that's where LinkedIn is brilliant, because I'm saying you got to talk to these people. You can't do that if you need to talk to people to sell a $2 pen, but you can if you've got a $20,000 corporate offer. Right. And that's the piece of this that I think a lot of people overlook as well, that I want you to kind of flip the funnel and look for the highest ticket opportunities you have. And then when you know how to do that, it funds your business so that if you want to sell pens one at a time on TikTok, you can pay somebody to do that for you. Right. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there, because I think that that's another piece of this that a lot of people overlook. And I gave me an opportunity to brag about you a little bit.
I'm so everybody, mainly because we haven't worked out how to go. This is a nugget, because the niching comment that you gave earlier was an absolute nugget to talk about niches, and that was an absolute nugget, and you remind me of it, and it's just been a principle that I keep coming back to, especially when you feel, oh no, I'm overcharging for that. Well, no, actually, what would you add in that would, you just feel like you're able to play with that kind of blue sky place, and you can see my eyes.
And they get higher, they get more value out of you, right? And that's what you're hoping. And then it's win, win, win. The last thing you want is somebody like realizing that there's something else you could do for this customer in this engagement, but you don't have the budget to do it. So you could provide more value, but if you provide that extra level of value, you're now losing money, right? Nobody wins in that situation. Right? Nobody wins in that situation. So you want to just provide that. And then at the end of the day, I mean, listen, are you going to lose people because of that? Of course you will, but you're going to gain more than you lose. And even if you lost half of them, you're still making the same amount of money for half the amount of clients, right? So it's a principle that I think as the world is moving into whatever the world is moving into now, people want more of that. They want more results-based, handheld, help me do this. I don't want your $2 something or your $2,000 something. I want you to help me make sure that I actually get results out of this. And that's a higher price point.
Yeah. And when you flip your business model around that, and you kind of think, well, actually I can just randomly check in on how you're doing, or I've genuinely seen this article. I think you run it, because you're not dealing with 20 people, you're dealing with maybe 5 people or 10 at max, and it's more genuine, but it's also more joyful, because you really having an impact on that person. You're kind of going, I really want to be in your corner.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Sorry to interrupt your questions, but I just felt like that was one thing I wanted to make sure I got into this conversation, because I remember that conversation vividly, and that was like, yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So listen, we were starting to talk about the podcast, and just for the audience here, what what kind of conversations can they listen into with the podcast?
When I started the podcast, I every other episode is a solo episode and the opposite is a guest episode. And I really thought it was going to shake out to which people wanted more of, but it's pretty even. So it's still doing that. So basically, the solo episodes, there's a lot of kind of teaching and training and a lot of, there's a lot of mindset around all of this. As you like, for you to go into a company to sell a $5,000 package as opposed to a $20,000 package, there's an identity shift that kind of has to happen, right? So there's a lot of that's in it because I think that's really valuable and helpful. So the solo shows are, we did a show recently. In fact, everybody should check it out. If you're an entrepreneur and you're not using LinkedIn creator mode, you're definitely losing opportunities. So I think it's episode 202, where I just basically talked about, here's all the reasons why you need to be using LinkedIn creator mode. I have an upcoming podcast about why all podcast hosts should be using LinkedIn creator mode, so sometimes it's things like that. I also, to me, LinkedIn is really all about connections, conversations. So I talk a lot about those kinds of things. And then I try to bring guests on that really can provide a high level of understanding of how things can be done. And they're anything from, like, I interviewed just a couple of weeks ago, and that episode is live already. I think it's maybe 211 or 210, Rhonda Swan, who runs a huge PR marketing firm. But we talked about the value of PR for people. And this is coming from somebody who, when you've got the budget, you're going to pay Rhonda, whatever, $20,000 a month to run your PR. But until then, you can be doing these things, So, and then what the changes are for that. We've had just so many amazing guests. I did an interview recently with somebody who talks about personal branding from a perspective of your wardrobe. And I never think about that. But if I'm preaching personal branding, if I'm saying you've got to shine a light on yourself, how you look matters, right? Yeah. So how can you be comfortable and how can you do it, right? I try to keep it all tied in. And, to me, the title Good Girls Get Rich, really what it means to me is when you spend all of your time, or as much of your time as possible, doing what you love to do and that you're really good at, that's where the abundance comes into your life, right? So stop doing things that you think you should be doing or other people think you should be doing, or things that you think you shouldn't get paid for because it's too easy to do, right? Those are the things people want from you. So focus on those things and then build your brand around that. And then just watch how this, how life shifts. And as you know, from having a podcast now, Claire, one of the best parts of it is really the people that you get to meet. So, and that's all, that ties all into everything I teach, right? To me, it's about connecting people. And, we know this, Claire, we've heard things like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. You're the sum of the 5 people you're surrounded with. There's cliche after cliche around this. So we know this to be true, right? So for me, what I love about my podcast is that I get to bring these brilliant people to my audience and they get to know them a little bit too.
It's brilliant. Oh, Karen, we could probably talk for half a day easily. but as we come to the end, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. One is, how can people get hold of you? And then the second is going to be, kind of what if you could. I think Tim Ferriss says, if you could take out one massive billboard right next to a motorway with one message, what would your message be? So let's start with, how can people get hold of you? How can they work with you? And how can they find out more?
Well, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm at Karen Yankovich across all social media platforms. So you can always find me on social media, but LinkedIn is where all the conversations happen. So connect with me there. Tell me that you heard me on this show. I'm happy to give you, if you ask me, I don't just randomly give information, randomly give opinions to people, but if you ask me, I'll give you some feedback on your profile. And it's a couple of action steps you can take. Happy to do that for anybody that wants that. And that's really the best place to reach me always, is connecting with me on LinkedIn, but I'm across all social media platforms with Karen Yankovich. And Claire, it's such an interesting question, because I did a talk one time and they nailed me to the wall after the talk, and they said, give me one thing. I really wanted to say, do your profile. I really, really, really wanted to say, do your profile. But the reality is, a gorgeous, brilliant profile that nobody sees is like a beautiful flyer nailed to a tree in the middle of a forest, right? So what I would have on that billboard is is reconnect with people. Connect with 5 people every week. Like make that like brushing your teeth. Connect with 5 people every week and just have conversations with these people. Find out what makes them tick. Let them find out what makes you tick and build out your network. We have gotten away from that. Social media has, I think, it's hurt that because we've got all these connections, but we don't know any of them, right? So get back to actually knowing the people and reach out at just 5. It doesn't take long. 5 people each week and watch the changes that happen in your life and your business. It's unbelievable. And it's so funny to me how, and listen, I have to remind myself to do it. So, but it's so funny to me how we forget that that's what, like I said, all those cliches, right? We know this. Why aren't we doing it? Right? So reach out to 5 people this week.
Yeah, and if we lived in a tiny village, we'd be bumping into those people. We'd be like, oh, hey, how are you doing? And oh, I'm so pleased that you brought that one through. So Karen, listen, it has been an absolute joy, and hopefully everybody watching or listening in can feel this energy. There's been so many bang on point pieces of advice that anybody can pick up and run with straight away, and it'll have a big impact on their life. And if Jen were here, she would echo the support as well, Karen. For me, working with you was a total game changer in terms of how I viewed myself, but also how I stepped up and took my place. And
well,
I need to have these conversations more often.
I so love to hear that. And I so love that you and Jen are doing this. And what I will say, if you want, maybe after this goes live or at some point, the 3 of us can do a LinkedIn live and kind of promote the podcast on LinkedIn, but we can get Jen involved in the conversation that way.
Superb. So for now, everybody listening in on Exponential Potential, it has been really good fun to have you here. I hope you've taken away lots of notes. We're going to make sure in the show notes there are all the links that you need to follow up. Again, like, subscribe, share this content. It's there to have a big impact on your life and those around you. So please do, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your comments and feedback. And if you've enjoyed it, please click on that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and feel free to share. Join us for our next episode of the Exponential Potential podcast. Ignite your potential and thrive in times of great change.